to one teammate the same way you talk to another teammate probably, especially when you're giving directions and things like that. I don't think that changes at all as a coach. You have to kind of be very err on the side of like understanding and like emotional intelligence. Like this player responds probably better if I pull them aside. They won't feel like a negative thing where others might address it in front of everyone. So everyone's kind of on the same page. So I think that's also important, just kind of reading the room in that sense.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with Coach Luca. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Coach Kate Jones. It was wonderful to speak to Kate about her coaching journey, where she's currently at and where she's going and what she's doing with her studies and how that's going for her. It's great to understand her outlook, her input, what she's going to do in coaching, how she likes to apply herself, the way that she's built up her coaching methodology, what frameworks that she has in place and how she's instilled this, how she works with players, how she reflects on things, what she's building towards in the future, what she'd like to support with as an assistant coach, the outlook towards being a head coach, how she leads on sessions, support sessions, that combination of experience which gives her an all-rounded experience as a coach from, assistant to head coach, and how this could look from different perspectives. How do you support players when in that assistant coach role and when things are delegated to you, and being able to be more hands-on with the players and be supportive, and how that might outlook towards being a head coach in terms of how that may look long-term, that adaptability, those interlinks between the experience as an assistant to a head. And it's a great coaching journey because sometimes coaches jump straight into the head coach role, or they try to get there too quickly and they don't cut their teeth as such by having that relayed experience or expanded experience or staying in a role long enough to go, right, I really excelled at working with the players or supporting them or giving that feedback and really help positioning them in a much better position as such to really work and support with the players to a higher level or higher degree, or to develop that empathy, that understanding, the way of working with players, supporting them, understanding them a little bit more. But it was great to speak to Kate about understanding the women's game and how this is evolving, how it's growing. There was a great quote that she had from Sam Kerr, and then she really had a comparison and perspective in terms of the girls and boys coaching, which is a real key takeaway in this as such, because sometimes we can go straight into working with different groups, and that could be youngsters to olders back to youngsters, or working with tots and early years, working with boys and girls, and working with these different types of groups may have different expectations in from the participants themselves, how they would like sessions to be run, what feedback they'd like, how they'd like it. And obviously there's different learning styles, different personalities, different groups work to each other, and obviously there's a lot of academic research about boys and girls in terms of the attainment of boys and girls, and how girls understand information, how they take it on board, and those different learning styles and how they interlink. So as part of your own coaching journey, it's great to have those different perspectives, because you may be taking on a new age group, or you may be taking on an additional age group, or you may start coaching a group that you've never coached before, and just being aware of the different needs and different understanding, different learning outcomes for these players is really supportive. As we delved into it though, it was great to speak to Kate about that learning process for the coaches. So the learning process and learning and the process to undertake for coaches themselves. So there's a key learning by being on the pitch, by continuously experiencing these different groups, by giving that feedback, how you reflect upon the process as a coach yourself, and what that process may look like for you. So whether it's, doing your badges and then trying to gain as much experience as possible, or doing a badge and then maintaining experience for a long period of time, and then doing a next badge, whether it's going into different groups, whether it's trying to step up the groups and really trying to position yourself to being open to those new experiences, to be challenged, to be put on the spot, to try and be pushed further. It's really interesting about how that may look, and sometimes we're creatures of habit by nature, and in terms of that nature, we like to be very comfortable. We like things to be maintained. We like to have sometimes the easy route, but sometimes absolutely being thrown into it or throwing ourselves into it and being hammered for it, it's about developing those skills such as that resilience, how to problem solve, to take feedback on board, that reflective process, and hopefully what this journey and this podcast is helping you with can develop those skills. Because sometimes coaches can take a hammering and then obviously it knocks their confidence. They don't want to get back on the pitch. They might not want to work with a group. They may not want to lead. They may not want to coordinate on certain delegations. But having that resilience to then really be hammered for it and then take that on board can really help instill that resilience and take it to the next level. But to try and be, pushed higher. And that's something which I'm relating to, because I like things to be very comfortable. I like things to be my way. I like it to flow where it's nice and easy. But now I started to look back and I'm like, right, I want to be pushed. I want to be put on the spot. I want to be challenged because I want that feedback on board. I want to know how I can chip away any negative habits that I have, or detrimental habits, or how can I really work with other groups, or how can I develop that resilience. So now I really want to elevate myself, and that's about that process which I've talked about. We talked about empathy from being an ex-player going into coaching, and transitioning in terms of those takeaways from the playing days to create sessions that work for players now. So having that empathy, as I've spoken about before on the podcast, of really understanding your players, understanding what you've gone through as well, and what you have gone through, what you could apply in terms of your coaching. So what you would have liked as a player, could it bring to your players? What you may not have liked, do your players really need that? And creating that fine balance, but as well as understanding your players, which then creates that great framework which you work within, how you deliver sessions, how you work with players, that session type delivery, and that's the learning process. So then as you continue to go through that, you end up refining your delivery and your framework, and that's how you elevate to those next levels as a coach, and you really develop and grow. But there's so much from when I was a player that I really take away, how I can apply it into my coaching. So how I can support my players, what I would like to put on, what I would have liked to have seen, what I really missed out on, what I don't want them to miss out on. So how can I really instill that? Creating the buy-in. So again, we've spoken about this previously on the podcast, but it's great to have different perspectives of how coaches can create buy-ins from their groups, their players, any techniques, methods and strategies that they may have, experiences from where they've tried to do something and it may not have worked. So Kate talks about those buy-ins of how to get players to really buy into your delivery, your process, your framework, what you expect to see from the team, how you'd like them to play, what you expect of them on and off the field. Creating that two-way relationship to then open up and have that empathy in those relationships, and really interlinking with some of the key takeaways and outcomes and components from previous episodes, whereby those relationships are really important to deliver that feedback, that accountability, the honest, straight up information that can be given back. We talked about taking accountability when you look back as a coach on your own delivery, your own process, your own reflections, wherever growing, wherever trying to evolve as coaches. And this accountability is really important for us to really, take on board, to understand where we're going and how we're going to get somewhere, but to also understand that we're here now and where we have come from. Because sometimes without reflecting back on that journey or that process, we're not going to really understand where we've excelled at, where we've fallen short, and areas that we may excel at and continue to instill within our delivery consistently. There may be areas that we're still lacking, but because we haven't reflected on the process, we haven't refined those skills, and we really need to try and take that to the forefront. We also spoke about emotional intelligence, how to address situations, reading the room, so again relating to your players, understanding, taking that accountability, trying to create that environment, etc. And then that contemporary and seminal experience combined, which allows you to refine that framework and that delivery. This is just some of what's in the episode. The rest of the episode, there is so much in there itself. But listen to it, get a notepad ready, as I said, continue with your notes, continue to have those takeaways, continue to learn. This is Kate Jones on the Reflective Coach podcast. There is so much to take away from her episodes. You can find the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Podcast Addict and Anchor. You can also find it on LinkedIn and Twitter. It's at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It's Anthony_Luca 96 on Twitter as well. You can also find it on TikTok and Facebook. And it's a growing platform. We're trying to expand the podcast as much as we can. It's sponsored by Humble Gifts. I'm Coach Luca. Drop a like, drop a follow, drop a subscribe, leave a comment. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I have. We had to try and get to that third take by the time we started this one, and then the builders happened to start their work as we recorded. But with true coaching experience, there was great adaptability, great resilience. We worked through it and we got the episode delivered. And I hope you enjoy this episode because it is such a great one. And Kate's passion, her experience, what she gives is really insightful, really powerful, and I took so much away myself. Enjoy it, and don't forget to leave that like, that comment, that subscribe, and that follow. I want to grow this platform as much as possible. It is great to see you as always. Enjoy this week's episode. This is Coach Luca on the Reflective Coach podcast. That's right, let's hope so. But yeah, finishing your master's degree, lots going on. Busy for you, very busy.
Yes.
So coaching, masters, and everything else?
Everything else, yeah. So finishing up my master's degree. So my last 2 months of that, and then just wrapping up with my club teams. We have our first tournament of the season this weekend. So our first really set of games. So hopefully get off to a good start. So.
Fantastic. And how are you prepping for this weekend? Is there a lot more preparation for it, or are you going to go like switch off a little bit and just have a more of a relaxed approach towards it? How's it looking for you?
So I coach a couple of 2013 teams, so they're 9-10-year-old girls. So unfortunately, the weather this week hasn't really been too cooperative. With being out on the grass, there's been snow and rain. So we actually haven't been able to really train as much as we would have liked heading into a tournament. So typically, in any first really tournament, I try to use it as a measuring stick. Like, okay, this is where we are, and this is where we can be, and just kind of get a feel. Like one of the teams I have is a team I've had for 2 years. So I know them pretty well in areas that they're really strong in, and maybe not as strong in. My experiment with them in those areas that they're not super strong in, so they kind of get more exposure to it. And then the other team I have, a lot of them are brand new to playing at the club level. So just kind of figuring out like on a playing sense, because I've only seen them training, and there's a difference between how you train and how you play. So just seeing how they do in an instance like that, and just seeing how they mesh together and where we can continue to improve for sure.
Fantastic. It'll definitely be exciting for you and a good experience for the girls, especially at those ages. And, it's how you say in terms of that strength that they go in with, and certainly that mental strength in terms of how they build up, how they, deal with the results on the day and deal with the outcomes after it, whether it's a high, whether it's a low. And it's real good swings and roundabouts for young ages to go through that. And I think it's really important part of that learning curve. Over here in Wales, we don't focus on competitive football up until at least 13, 14. And I know they're trying to push it back to minimum age of 14. Whereas in England, they start at under 7s, under 8s competitive leagues. We're very different here. So if we're very lucky here in Wales, we can apply and go and play across the bridge and enter tournaments which are competitive. A lot of the times it's a yes, as a lot of teams get a no because of the differences. But there are always things that I've invested in with my teams, because I think that learning curve from such a young age is so important. We don't want to overkill it, but it's like, right, this is the experience. We want to keep that motivation. Every kid loves to win. If they're competing, they've never done this before, being in a knockout format. How do they deal with it if they don't progress through the group stages? How do they deal with it coming against teams that are built on that competitive edge because they've been doing it since under 7s, and we haven't in that sense? And I think it's real importance for kids to experience that.
Oh, most definitely. And like you said, a lot of kids just want to win. And, that's kind of a talk I've had with the girl in the front, is like, that's not the most important aspect at your age. Like, as you get older, yeah, the wins will count for something. And I mean, it's not the most important thing. But right now, like, development is so key at their age, learning the fundamentals, just learning to love the game and your own passion. Because not all kids, like, even all the kids I coach, I know won't stick with it their whole careers. I hope a good majority of them do. But just kind of leaving them with the aspect of like core values, letting them find their own passion, and I'll support them in any sort of way in that regard. I think that's super important. Especially as a female coach to females, they look at me and, they see someone else that represents them. So, no, I completely wholeheartedly agree. I think, with competition, there's a certain thrill to it. It's a lot of fun. And so I think that's like one of my core values is a winning mindset. Not that winning's the most important thing, but that you want to compete and show up to be the best teammate you can be every day. So.
Absolutely love that, and that's such a great takeaway. The sort of clip later on when I sort of get round to editing it. But no, that's certainly an important point. And when we talk about that winning mentality, and it's not everything, as you say, and there's a lot to take away from it. But when you have that natural individual or group of them who are winners and want to push themselves, constantly want to learn, constantly want to be scoring the goals or doing the best or keeping the clean sheets, and that you naturally see them because it's innate. How do you deal with that in a bigger group when you have those who play recreationally, those who are happy to do it alongside another sport, those who are do it because they're sort of pushed in that way? How do you sort of deal with it when you've got those winners in that group and that dynamic?
So pretty quickly, I think there's a balance of those players that are really into it and the commitment from their parents too. I think it goes hand in hand. I've noticed where parents are probably a little bit less committed. There's players that are probably a little less committed to playing, or wanting to be that best player on the team, or whatever you call it. But I think in terms of I open myself up to individual sessions if there's a player, a family that's interested in working a little bit more further along, like in a more, I guess, attentive sense where I can pay more attention to maybe little things that can help them. Well, they already their strengths are noticeable, but about helping them with their weaknesses and things along that line. I make myself available for that, and my policy is I don't seek out parents like, hey, we need to be doing individual sessions. I let them, if they feel like their kid is at that point where they want to make that jump and that step, they know how to get in contact with me. And that's part about a lot of good things. There's kids I work with on a regular basis, and just helping them. Because I do have several kids and who are super passionate about it and want to play pro. They look up, to the U.S. Women's National Team. Also, it's a team that we have here that they can see in front of them pretty often.
You okay?
All right, take 3.
That's right.
I'm not sure what's up with the internet connection today.
That's right. We'll persevere. We'll get through it. But yeah, it's because I've been in that similar position where you do get those natural players who are winners, and then you end up finding the groups, as I said, and it was something that became a good focus point in terms of how I understood the psychology of my team, individuals, and how it affected our dynamic. And over the years, as I've grown as a coach, grown as a manager, and grown with the other teams, you end up at times losing those players who are natural winners because they fall out in those relationships with those who might not be. They find it frustrating then to be with the lesser technical players or players who don't want it as much. Sometimes losing them can be a bigger benefit to the team than actually keeping them, because when I was a younger coach and I didn't have that experience, it was when you're 18, 19, you're dealing with adults who are in their 30s, who've been in and around it, who are pushing their kids more. You get that technical side of the player, which is really good, and sometimes you might build your team around that player. But as you're doing so, you end up sacrificing the players who are lesser technical. So as those years progressed, we ended up losing the better players as such, and therefore the dynamic ended up being a greater benefit as a result of it.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's fine.
No, like you. I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
course, on all days they choose today. But I mean, yeah, I think kind of like you said, like you've been in a similar situation as a young coach, where that's kind of the rule I'm in. I think for the one team that I've had for the 2 years, they're definitely, I feel, probably the more passionate group about making that jump. And I've had several. So the way it works at my club is that we have like it differs per age. I'm so sorry. I really apologize.
That's right. It's all right.
But so like I was saying, we have a few teams per age group, and every age group is different. Some age groups I only have two. But for my particular age group, I coach there's 4 teams, and I coach the bottom 2 teams, like essentially our C team, our D team, and several of my players from my C team have actually moved up to the B team, or the A team. So kind of I've noticed a trend with I think there's a different aspect when you do start on maybe a lower team instead of the top team, is that will to really push on and really challenge those players on the A team, the B team, whatever per se. And I'm very happy that my players have gone on, a good handful of my players have gone on to do that and really compete for those types of positions and have really put themselves in a really good spot. Like if they are super serious about playing this and playing at a competitive level, really put themselves in position to really compete with those types of players. And then my other group, like I said, they're just starting out. There's definitely I see in some of their eyes like this is something they definitely want to do, and that's something I can work with. And then for others, they're just kind of testing the waters, and that's completely fine too. That's the beauty of the sport, is that it's inclusive and open to anyone that wants to play. So no, I mean you definitely get the 2 different types of players, and I think for me on a personal for my playing time was when I experienced that was in high school, because obviously when you play for your school. I only think I had 4 or 5 teammates that actually played for a club, and the rest were just doing it, something to be with their friends with every day. So you kind of get it in all ways of life. So.
Absolutely, and it's that interesting dynamic then, how you work with those players and those who want it more and those who aren't willing, and that's something that I've come into an under 19s team, and we've ended up blending 2 teams together. So the original 19s last year and the 16s who have come through. So the 19s last year had a different coach, the 16s had a coach. I've come in, so we've already had to amalgamate 2 different groups. Then they've had a change of coach. Then there's been a change of style. Some of the older boys, then there's that age group difference between them, and they're playing first and second. Some are breaking in from the 16s in terms of the thirds, seconds, and firsts. But then it's the older boys, when they are coming in, because they have that more experience and that technical ability. Some of them have been in the academy and that environment for many years, so they're used to playing with very high quality players. And over the year, they've ended up getting frustrated with the younger 16s who are not up to their level. And then they've ended up dropping off, going, do you know what, I'm going to play with the first, I'm going to play with the second, that's where I want to be anyway. I'm getting frustrated playing with them, and I can completely understand it. But when the younger boys were coming through, they found it difficult because they thought already those players were taking their places on the basis of their technical ability. But it was their personality that surrounded that allowed the older boys to take those, because they had that personality, the communication, the dominance. They had everything that they could bring to that winning mentality. And the 16s almost expected their positions to be given to them, and then the 19s to work and get those positions off them. But it was entirely the other way round, and some of the 16s really struggled to deal with trying to have that competitive edge and trying to fight for that place. And that's what it's all about, and that's what I kept re-emphasising, is like that Mourinho style effect. You want some to push, you want some to fight, you have to give that killer edge, you have to stop being so nice and go, right, it's all right if you have that spot. I remember being in the change room, one of the boys had the 16s had a shirt number on, and one of the 19s turned up late, and he went, where's that number? And the 16-year-old took it off. I was like, no, you don't ever do that again. You got that number first, you keep that number. If he can't get you, you dominate. And just that little thing is just that dominance in the change room. And I was like, it won't upset our change room because we can deal with it. And it's just like the way you would show that on a pitch is what I expect you to do here in the change room. So it's certainly a big mentality where they've missed out on that over the years in terms of the pathway they've come through, and I think they've struggled to adapt to that. So it's about working with players who might not have that outright innate ability to be that dominant winning personality as such?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like a give and take for those players that might be, because I do have a few players on my second team that are very much like there's a few players that have already played club for at least a year. And, I can see at times they might get frustrated with one of the players that just came through rec. And it's just about kind of pulling them to the side, like, support them, like come together to find some sort of common goal that you guys want to achieve on this season. For them, it might be just having fun, and then for you, it might be you want to win. And then, but can you meet somewhere in the middle and kind of find some little baby steps, like things you'd like to kind of tick off and achieve in the midst of the season. Where my other team, it's just completely different. Like they do want to win, they want to compete, but they like I said, they've had me for just a very tight knit group, so it's very hard to kind of, I guess, rattle them in that sense.
And in the terms of the different teams, then, in terms of the team that are happy to play for fun and the team that are more competitive edge, do you have a preference in terms of when you're going into sessions and coaching a team, or is it you don't mind having that balance because of coaching them both?
So it's funny how it works out because for this season, on one day, so we only train 2 times a week, and we train for like an hour and 30 minutes. And so when we meet on our first day of training during the week, they train together. Both teams train together. And then on the second training day of the week, they're separated. So one team will go first, the other team will go right after them. And I think that's important because the team that the second level team can see, okay, this is what they're doing here. And this is what, like, they've had me for longer, so they know kind of like the whole layout. They know what I expect and things like that, how I like to coach and along that nature. So they can kind of see them doing what they do, and then it's kind of like reverse back over to them. All right, what are we going to do? And I think it's like the important aspect of that is obviously because they are at 2 different levels. They're 3 or 4 divisions apart in the league we play in. So it's important that they also get that attention to, like, we had a game at the weekend. This is what we need to work on. But they're not going to be working on the same thing that the other team needs to work on in a very rare sense. So it's about paying, I guess, attention to the small little details just to kind of help them continue to tweak their game. And, they need a little bit more, I guess, different attitude for me. Like one team can have me, like they know I might expect a little bit more of them, like if we come off with that result, where another one, it's a learning curve for them. So I guess just kind of finding a good balance between, especially for those days that we do train together, finding something where it's going to benefit everyone's, because I don't want to, like, that's 22, 23 kids that I have to myself, and I don't want to, like, shortchange any of them in any regard in terms of attention and instruction and things of that regard. So.
I love that, and I love how you say you have a different personality in terms of the group that you're with, because I think that's so beneficial in terms of communications, the standards, the expectations, how you work with them, and I think that's important and something that every coach can bring to their game is that different personality. So, that can suit in terms of just for one group if a coach only has one group. So on a Saturday, they might be game heavy and very related to that, and this is discipline, this is the expectation, and then come Wednesday after the game, a couple of days, it might just be a bit more of a session with a lull in it, where it's like, right, let's have a bit of recovery, let's not hit it too hard, and let's go again Saturday. So I think that's really important for some coaches because they have the same attitude, same mentality every session. And that's something that I learned because I had such high expectations of my team. It can only burn yourself and the team out. And sometimes it was like, right, not every session had to be like that. And we've instilled the expectations now and just let the group go out and have that fun. Let them have that enjoyment, especially as you get those groups who, as you say, of those players who turn up just to have that fun, is that not every session needs to be so intense to them. So it was just finding that right balance, and that's something that every coach will find along their own pathway. But I think it's great that you say about different attitudes of coaches, and I think that's a really important point. And it's great. And when you say that attitude, you find your attitude changes between boys and girls as well then?
Honestly, I think it's funny because I haven't really noticed too much of a difference. I noticed that the boys, that's all they want to do is just play and play and play. Where girls, you kind of have to maybe, some of them, not all of them, I won't speak for all of them, But some of you kind of have to work it like them into like, okay, let's start out with some sort of game that's going to kind of get you into the like understanding of maybe what the topic might be. For boys, you just tell them, all right, here's like two goals, and yeah, here's two goals. Here's some like some bibs, go play. And they'll go and do it, and and they'll compete, hard. Where some girls, especially like because my club does rec outreaches, which is where we kind of find a lot of players that we would like to bring into the club by doing these training sessions, holding these training sessions for them, and especially where I found a few of my players that ended up playing the tryouts and they made the team. And for me, it's about kind of starting off with a game like whether that's like Sharks and Minnows or something just fun, just to kind of get them relaxed. Because I think that's the most important thing when you're trying to get kids into playing is that they first have to enjoy it. Because I would have a hard time showing up to something I don't really enjoy. That's why I'm very fortunate to do something I love every day. But I know I would struggle if I was doing something I didn't enjoy. And so I think it goes the same way for kids. Like you have to allow them to enjoy it first and foremost. They have to enjoy what they're doing, and that's where my attitude comes in. Is like I like to have fun, but there's also a time when we have to really lock in and get serious and switch on in that regard. But no, I think there's definitely a little bit of a difference, but then there's a lot of similarities, especially with young kids. Like they have tons of energy, and especially the ones that just want to compete and win. They'll play and they'll play hard. So.
Absolutely, and I agree. And when you say getting kids to relax or getting players to relax in that sense, I think that's so important, especially when you're doing talent ID and those rec outs. And I certainly reflect on a couple of talent IDs that I've attended as a scout and supported. And it's fast paced. There's a lot of players, a lot of spectators, coaches, and then they're doing identification. The scouts are on the side. There's lots of talk about players. Numbers are being taken. Players are being thrown in and out. They're getting put on bigger pitches, smaller pitches, different groups. They're playing various positions. They're then in teams where they don't know the players around them, and there's a lot going on, and it's a very hard environment to expect a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old to go into, especially for that talent identification, even if it's half a day, couple of hours, and I remember doing one once. We had like something like 400 players in a 2-hour period, and then we flipped over, had another 2 hours, and then had another 400 players come in. I was like, right, so as a scout, I'm supposed to have looked at 800 players over a 4-hour period, and it just never worked. And I know the club that I was with have never ever done it again. But I just felt so sorry because there were so many talented players which we saw, and because they weren't relaxed and weren't in their element, they weren't really able to show themselves. And then we used that as a basis of, right, they had that one chance. Now it doesn't work like that. They said they need that 2 free sessions, or they need to come in and have that 3-week period, because they might be very different in week 1 compared to week 3 because they're settled, they're finding themselves. And that's why we see when players come into like the Premier League or big money's been spending, then there's a lot of criticism on them going, oh, they're not so good. That's because they struggle to settle in, and then 6 months later they're dominating the league, for example. And it's the same goes for a 6, 7, 8-year-old, because they're not getting paid millions of pounds to be in that position where it's okay, or have someone speaking in their ear, or psychologist, or they're not in that position, or they don't have that experience, and it's very tough when it is that process. So I think it's really important that you have that to just relax, get to know the kid, just settle down a little bit, come into the session, find your own feet. And I think that's so important for every coach as a little takeaway there, just as a reflection, really.
Yeah, and I think like what you said about Premier League players coming in and maybe not meeting fans' expectations, and I think it was Sam Kerr that said it in a documentary, and I really liked it because I feel like it relates so true. Is the difference between the men's game and the women's game is in the men's game you have to play well to belong, where in the women's game if you belong you play well and you feel like you belong there. So there's definitely I think there's a difference in between my role in the sense of expectations. And I mean, you kind of seeing it filtered more into the women's games with more bigger signings being made. But I would definitely agree with that sentiment she said, because I think in this season it's been like Darwin Nunez at Liverpool, a big signing. He he missed probably some little goals that you should be tucking away. But I think it's completely natural. And even though I'm not a Liverpool fan, I don't have any sympathy for it. But no, I think there's definitely that little essence of like you have to let them settle in first, so get used to the system, because the leagues are so different across the world. the MLS is so. I'm just gonna have to keep logging up back on.
That's right. I'll just clip it up when it comes at the time and try and transition those smoothly. But yeah, I absolutely love that in terms of as players have that understanding themselves that is needed, and that sense of belonging is so important because there are so many different environments, and as every player pushes themselves and tries to make the dream happen and work for them, sometimes even though they're pushing and trying to put their foot in the door and open as many as they can, and to have that awareness of who they are and trying to get that recognition. Sometimes if they're not having that sense of belonging, then they're never really going to be natural and never going to really have those memories, those relationships. And because they don't have that sense of belonging, they're never really going to buy into what the philosophy or ethos actually is. And because then they're extending themselves across maybe 3, 4 different clubs or platforms, they're never really truly representing themselves because they don't have that buy-in. They're not representing the badge on their hat, or they're not playing with that true purpose. And it's the purpose is to represent and be proud of who you play for. And they've got that other purpose and the objective of making it pro, but sometimes that can shoot them in the foot because it's taken away from those opportunities. Just that sense of belonging and creating that in a player, which I think can bring so much, especially as they're younger and as a buy-in, really.
No, I mean, I completely agree with everything you're saying. I think, like, just instilling that sort of belief too. I think it comes down a lot to, in the position, in the role as a coach, just kind of being able to say, like, I believe in you, but also, you have to get the team to back you too. You have to get your players to, put their trust in, and sometimes trust is so hard to come by. You have to, it's earned, right? You have to earn one's trust. So, no, I think you definitely see it, like, how the role it plays, and in the sense of performance, and then maybe when a player is maybe lacking a little bit in confidence.
And when we talk about those buy-ins, do you then essentially, obviously, when you're trying to sell the club, trying to get players in, recruit them, and get them involved and everything around that scenario? But even when you are coaching different groups, or you might be put in a different context, etc., do you essentially go out and then go, right, these players have to buy into me, and I'm going to do this for them to buy into you, or do you just go in with your same sort of coaching head on and go, right, this is how it's going to be. Let's see what happens from here.
I think my approach has always been, I think, like, I'm a young coach, I'm learning, and my players are constantly, like, even though I kind of have my set way of things, like, I wasn't playing too long ago, like, not too far off my playing days, so I feel like I bring an aspect of things I know I would have liked when I was probably their age from a coach, and I had great coaches, don't get me wrong, but just things that probably worked for me that would work for kids their age. And then also my own personality. I think that's the most important thing as a coach is to be consistent in your personality, not necessarily changing or adapting to the players around you, and not exactly forcing them to kind of like adapt to you, but kind of warping them in, like you said, buying into the vision you have and the way you like to run things and things of that regard. I think that's super important. But being, and like in the sense of reflection, being able to take accountability when you look back and say, okay, maybe there's a little, little ways I can maybe change it to maybe suit them more. And I think for me, like as a teammate, I had so many different teammates with so many different personalities. You can't talk to one teammate the same way you talk to another teammate, probably, especially when you're giving directions and things like that. I don't think that changes at all as a coach. You have to kind of be very err on the side of like understanding like emotional intelligence. Like this player responds probably better if I pull them aside. They won't feel like a negative thing, where others you might address it in front of everyone, so everyone's kind of on the same page. So I think that's also important, just kind of reading the room in that sense, and what one another plays. So.
No, I think that's really important is reading the room, especially understanding the players, the way that they've sort of taken things on board. So if after a game, how they reacting to it, how's the dynamics within the change room, and just little things like that of reading the room is so important, and something that I try to emphasise with everyone that I work with, even away from football. But I love that you say that consistency and warping the team around you essentially, because it just gives a little reflection point every time I speak to a coach. It's like, right, how can I reflect to this? Because that's where the objective of the podcast came from, and that, and it's great because we sort of have these conversations, and it's like, right, I've got a group now, and because of my consistency and the way I've coached with them and taken over this 19s group, they've warped to my expectations and the way it's going to be. And some of them won't warp entirely and will realise, right, it's not for me. They don't want to comply with it, or it's a little bit difficult because there's a big step between 16s and 19s. And that's completely fine because they have to go out and find what's for them and have that sense of belonging. And they might go somewhere else and go, do you know what, I belong to just playing youth football and I'm happy to do that, or I'm happy to play recreationally. And but I think those consistencies allowing a team to warp to you, that rather than going in, right, this is my expectations, this is that, this is that, this is that, you have to do all of that. Sometimes, especially with younger players, by naturally working with them, you're going to do all that instead of having, that 2-hour presentation to kick things off. And players will naturally take to your style, take their team, and even if they find it a struggle at times, naturally they will go, do you know, I like Coach Kate. Oh, she's actually really nice here, and I understand why she's being like that on the pitch, because some players might find we're being too disciplined on them, but it's a case we want the best out of them, and then they're realising, all right, take them out of the game situation, take them out of training, I can have this conversation, and that's where it becomes really important then at that point.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. And I think with kids, and I mean, it can even happen at an older age too. I've noticed that. Is some kids kind of take maybe some sort of offense to being coached at, and maybe like the coach just talking to them the whole time. But I was always taught that if the coach isn't talking to you, then they really just don't care about you. And that's when you should probably start worrying, is when your coach stops talking to you. So I think it's important. While I want them to be creative, I don't know if the term is the same in the UK in the sense, but here there's a habit of coaches that are very joystick, like telling players, this is where you need to be, and this is what you need to do, and things like that. I'm very much kind of hands off in the sense, we do what we do during the training week, and then we try to apply that at the games. And especially for young kids, I think with older kids the approach is different, but for younger kids, with what I'm working with, it's so important to let them have that game to be where they can express their creativity and figure out different things and what works, what doesn't. This, and kind of getting to interact with their teammates amongst them, and the other team obviously figuring out different triggers and cues for what a game calls for. But so I don't do a whole lot of talking on the sideline. I might make 2 or 3 coaching points at the half, but at that point I want them to talk to each other and kind of what's working. Like, the players are out there experiencing it. I'm just on the sideline seeing what I see. So it's important to let them also give me feedback so I can make adjustments where needed. And then like when we talk about personalities, having your own personalities, and coaches never really straying too far away from that and trying to change it or make it adapt to the people around you. I think like I'm the type of person, I love feedback. Like, I want coaches to give me feedback. I don't mind if they come over and say maybe attempt this, or maybe this might work better. I'll take it in gladly. If I use it. But I think it's also important to kind of like, okay, I'm taking in the information. I respect your opinion, but also like, this is what works and has been working and things of that regard. And I don't think there's anything wrong with either. It's all part of one's coaching education and development. So.
And I love all of that, and there's so much in that. I love that you're open to taking feedback on board, and how you do things, and that you're willing to take things from other coaches, because some coaches, don't like being told that feedback, or they don't like being approached by other coaches and be given a way of doing things, for example. But I think it's great that you also say making 2, 3, maybe 4 points on the coaching sideline, and then letting the players go out there and find it for themselves, or problem solve, and then come back to you and go, oh, we would actually like this, or this worked really well, but we'd maybe like a bit more of this. And I think that's great because, you know, players want to go out and play at the end of the day, and sometimes we can overcoach them and give them too much information because, you know, suddenly they got their role, then they got the system, then the expectations of the player they're coming up against. Then, you know, we might coach them in a game as well. Then they've got all the external environment around them. So there's a lot going on for them to comprehend, especially for a young player. Apologies. And then in that sense, I can think of a coach that I coached against recently, and for 90 minutes he was just rah, 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 rah at his players. And I was like, I can't be coached by him. I just wouldn't be able to. And I feel so sorry for these 16-year-olds training and playing. And they're never going to be able to sort of go away, stand on their own two legs, transition, because they're going to be so used to having him, you know, for 90 minutes go on at them, then they're never going to really be in that position to take things away or problem solve or be ready to, you know, go on and progress the game themselves. And I just felt a little bit sorry for those players, and I was like, there's no chance I could be coached by him. So, and that's an important point that I absolutely love there. We can overcoach, and sometimes 2 or 3 points is more than enough.
Oh yeah, no, and what you're describing, I've seen countless times, and there is such a thing as overcoaching, and I think there is a time and a place where you might be able to overcoach and to a point, and I feel like that's the training ground. There, you kind of are working on different things, and that's like where you want to introduce new concepts, and maybe like one thing I'm big on my players is passing patterns and, you know, figuring out different ways of play, because I like my teams to be able to build and be comfortable on the ball and have some sort of personality on the ball. Like, because I know I played on teams like early on when I was just starting out, maybe at the recreational level, where you got the ball, and as soon as you got the ball, everyone was like, no, get it away from me. Like, someone else needs to take this off of me. So kind of getting my girls very comfortable with having the ball at their feet and then knowing what to do when you get it. So obviously for my more recent like new team that's just starting out, this is a concept that's going to be like trial by error. Like there's going to be mistakes, and you know there's have to, you know, it's going to be a huge learning curve for them. It might be where I have to really step in and like, okay, like overcoach a little bit. And I feel like that's maybe the appropriate setting. Never in a game will you see me just, I don't have the voice for it either to like just constantly just talk and yell and all that at my players. And I feel like that's the unfortunate thing that, you know, happens is there's a lot of coaches that just feel the need to just constantly talk. And I mean, that might be what works for them, but it doesn't work for your players. And I think that's one area where you might have to change your personality a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know that. I honestly did not know that happens in other places. I thought that was a really bad thing here that has to change. But no, I mean, I guess you get it everywhere if you get it in one place. So.
And I love that trial by error, and that's something that I remember doing once with some younger players. So we call it guided discovery learning here in Wales, and that's something that we build into types of sessions that we deliver in terms of the coaching framework as you go through as a coach on your badges. And I remember doing it once and helping a coach deliver a session, and they took it really into their stride. They never really done it before, and they really like it, took to it, and allowed the players to then problem solve, be creative, and so on. And I remember they got approached by a parent going, why are you letting them do that? Why aren't you giving them lots of instruction? Why aren't you constantly coaching them? And then they had to go back at them and go, well, this is actually a guided discovery learning platform. And then they had to really go back and sort of describe the situation, what the purpose was, what the objective, and what the framework was for it. But this parent just couldn't comprehend the point of this player making mistakes. And I was like, well, they are going to coach because they're going to allow them to make those mistakes, and then they're going to address it, they're going to reframe it, and then they're going to go again. But I remember just a parent kicking off because they were like, what is the purpose of this? But it is so important as part of the game and a way of coaching players, and I think it definitely has to be done.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because that's an exact scenario. I haven't gone, I want to work on my UEFA badges, but I've been working on my US soccer. And for part of when I was doing my grassroots, I think it was for my 11v11, I was with another female coach, and we were kind of given 2 different roles for our 2 teams. she was supposed to overcoach and I was supposed to skip little points here and there. And how did the players react to that? Did they react better to the coach that overcoached them and like stepped in the middle of their drill and told them like, no, we gotta stop this right now. Like this is what you need to do and this is where you need to be. Or did they react better to the coach that night and just pulled them off to the side like real quick in the middle of the drill and said, hey, try this next time. So yeah, I think it's funny how education comes into that regard and how we react to our environments that we're placed in. But I mean, I like the discovery learning. I like that term too. But yeah, I think obviously there's parents that might expect their kid to be overcoached, and there's parents that probably respect a coach that doesn't overcoach. I think there's probably no middle ground there. It's one or the other.
Absolutely. And you say you're quite a young coach in that sense. You've come off on the back of injury, I believe, and started coaching from playing. So how many years have you been coaching?
So I played for 17 years, and I got a heart condition. Well, I found out I had a heart condition my junior year of college, and the following year I was actually supposed to go on a trial for a pro club. So I was kind of just there, and then that all occurred. But with that all occurring, my college coach pulled me aside and he said, I think you would make a terrific coach one day. Like, why don't you stay on? He's like, even if you don't want to be a coach one day, he's like, why don't you just stay on the staff so you're still with the team and, still around your teammates and all that. And I kind of took it all my stride. I didn't know what to expect at first. I was just showing up to trainings every day and just sitting there and just watching. And then finally I kind of worked up to, okay, like, would it be okay if I ran some drills? And he was totally cool with that. He's like, you can work with the forwards because I was a forward. So I started doing more of that. And then he kind of allowed me to do more things. So a lot of girls felt, because they were like they were doing the things that I did. So they felt comfortable coming to me. So there was nothing that I hadn't, that they didn't do that I hadn't done. So they felt more comfortable coming to me for like film and advice and things like that. Like, where do you think I should maybe step up a little bit and little questions like that and feedback I can give them, because also the type of person I don't like to beat around the bush. Like, I'll tell you straight up how maybe where you can really be helping this team. And it's funny because my role became, when I stepped into the role of coaching, like that's what I was told, is that this is how you can help the team by staying like in this position. So and I think from there on, just because before I never really gave coaching much thought. I just kind of had playing, and I was like, if I don't play, I just kind of want to work in sports. I don't want to coach. But then being on the sidelines and not being able to play, and then seeing how because there's so much more to coaching than just showing up to training and having a plan and then coaching, giving out directions for the game. There's a lot that goes into it. There's film, and obviously like, as a college coach, there's recruiting and things like that. There's just so much more to it. And then with coaching kids, I feel like there's a lot more than just being there for them on the soccer field. There's they have plays, they play other sports. Like, can you be at those events and support them in that regard? Like, any passion they have, like, allow them to invite you and really take interest in what they have passion for. And so, and I think that's what, like, one area where I probably have an upper hand is because I am younger, is I can really truly be more accessible to them than maybe someone with a family and other things in their life. So, but that kind of just led me on this journey. So I guess in total, I maybe 3 or 4 years, because once I graduated from my college, I'm doing my master's degree. So when I came to Cincinnati to start my master's degree, I took a position as the director of soccer operations and player analysis at a Division I school, Xavier University, which is where I'm getting my master's degree. So I was going to be I knew I was going to be in that role while I was getting my master's degree. I'm not working with the team this semester as I wrap up things, but I worked with them for 2 falls and 1 spring. And it was a great experience. We got coaching staff of the year in 2021. We won our conference and got a nice championship ring, and so that was a rich experience, just to kind of because I wasn't exactly a coach, but I was there in the room. I was at the training sessions, I was at the games, and kind of just learning from what this caliber of coaches, what they do and what they expect, and how to run a program like that. And we have a very good program here. But then also it was kind of like flicking the switch because I was also working with 9, 10-year-olds. So I would go from this Division 1 collegiate training to go coach 9, 10-year-olds. And it's like in the car, I'd have to like in my head, I'll be like, all right, 9, 10-year-olds now, 9, 10-year-olds. So, but I think it's funny how that's worked out because there's sorts of terms and things I might call out to them that they've now, like, I'll go to a game with them. We had like this team event where we were at this game, and they were calling out the same directions to like these pro players that I'd given to them on the field at some point. So it's funny how their brains are very much like sponges, and so they take the information that you give, and it'll stick there. So you got to be careful what you say sometimes too. But no, it's funny how that works out. So I don't think you necessarily, because I think a question I've been asked is because I do, I come from college, like that's my more recent experience as being a college player. Like you have to water down the terms you use with kids because they are just kids, and I don't think that's good. Like even with drills, you don't necessarily you can water those down a little bit. They can do like these, maybe a little bit more intermediate drills. You might have to water them down just or like a little bit. But in the sense of terminology, I think the earlier they get to experience, the different terminology, the probably the better off they'll be as they get older because they'll have an understanding of it where kids might be just learning it. So like kind of getting back to everything, I mean, I think at least 3 or 4 years I've been coaching. This is my second year of coaching club. So, and it's been an experience because it's just very much brought me back to my roots because I played for club soccer for 8 or 9 years. So it's different being in the coaching aspect now, for sure.
Pretty incredible story, to be fair, and I'm sorry to hear that the pro playing career was affected by a medical condition, but it's pretty amazing that you've continued to stay in the football world and coaching and are thriving from it, because you definitely, you say that you're a young coach and still building your way up, but it's as if you've been coaching for 10 years and you've got that behind you. And it's just the way that you come across, and I think that the importance of terminology is great, and that's where that, game intelligence comes from, because as I work with the older players and I'm saying things to some of the 16-year-olds, they're like, what's that? What's this? They've never really heard of that. And I'm like, I was doing this with my 10-year-olds, like when I had them. And it just became part and parcel because I had that group for 7 years and we just built it in, and it was a natural thing to us. And now we're sort of, as a 16-year-old, to have to get in and do this intervention work with them to really address what this terminology means and how they have that game intelligence, how they go on and grow it. And I think that's so important to certainly build into a team, especially for a young age. And as you say, you might water it down and, in the exercises themselves, and you might use terminology here and there, but it's little things that just become natural and they'll really take away and benefit. So I think that's fantastic to have, and there's certainly a lot in terms of the experience that you have and where you're going with it, and it's pretty incredible that you are continuing with it and where you want to go. And being from the outside, obviously over here in the UK, speaking to a lot of American coaches, the American dream, as it just sounds absolutely fantastic, and something to certainly go on and thrive on. But I know in previous conversations that we have, you've got your own criticisms of it. It's not the greatest system in the world, that you've alluded to. But it's allowing you to get there. So realistically, if we said, right, what's the next 10 years look like for you? Do you have a sort of plan or vision or strategy which you're going with?
It's funny you mentioned that because I'm currently in the process. I've been talking and interviewing with different. I've been given a lot of contacts overseas in England, and so I would say 10 years I would love to be coaching abroad. Ideally, once I wrap up my master's degree in May, my dream and hope, and that's what I'm working towards right now, is to be getting a work visa to work abroad and coach abroad. I feel with the way the women's game has grown overseas, particularly in England, and so it's a great time just to kind of get stuck in. And I think with, I guess, my experiences in the U.S., coming through the U.S. system and being a female, where our females do a little bit better than our male teams, a lot better, but being able to kind of translate that to bringing it to England, and so, and just helping the game grow. And I think there's a little bit more, like the structure obviously is a lot different, and it's something I would have to learn, but it's something I'm willing to learn. I'm eager to learn. Getting my UEFA badges and things like that. I'm kind of open to anything. Obviously, I have to be able to support myself, but I think anything involving like grassroots level, kind of starting out there, maybe even maybe academy level, and then working my way up. I would love to coach professionally one day. I mean, at the moment, I would love to coach professionally. We'll see how it does. Like, if I get to the academy level and say I love it and I don't believe it, then I'm not going to. If it's not broke, don't change it. So, I might end up staying there, but I think right now, kind of working my way up to coaching at a pro level would be pretty cool. I think everyone always says that, but I think that that's something that realistically I can do if I just continue to learn. And I think, I always say, I think any coaches guilty of saying this. I think the day that we stop learning and we think we have all the answers is probably the day that we probably need to just cut ties and not coach, because that's never really be how we feel about what we do. I learn from my players. I learn from other coaches around me. I constantly learn the game, and I think that's the most important aspect, just in general in the role of a coach. So.
Again, I love that, and so much to take away just from that as well. And it can be literally a switch door policy. So if you want to come over to England and I'll go into America as an exchange, that's something that we can always do. Yeah, there we are. We'll just do a swap over if you want, and just do like a work experience to see what happens. But being in America, then, as you say, you want to be a pro coach. Do you not feel that is achievable being out over in the States?
I think the pathways. I think. In terms of support, but like support from clubs, obviously a lot of clubs overseas have the backing of a pro club. There's Arsenal women who have Arsenal, and then Liverpool women that have Liverpool. So there's a lot of backing. Where here in Cincinnati, even though the city gets really into the games and we have an MLS team, they don't really have like a youth team per se, or like an academy level team. There's just a lot of Cincinnati clubs that just pop up all over. I think, there's a few like individual teams that have the backing of the MLS team. They might not have but they don't share the same name. I think, in the sense of developing talent, you want to develop your homegrown talent, talent on your soil. I feel like that's where we're kind of ways behind. There's a lot of different things that go into it. Obviously, like here we have the pay to play system. So in order to be playing club, you have to pay an X amount of dollars to be able to even be given that opportunity. Which is where I think there's a lot of fall behind in the sense of finding talent, because some of those really talented players don't have the means to that. I was very fortunate. I had parents that were willing to pay X amount of dollars to allow me to play for a club that was going to get scouted by pro clubs and college teams, but not every kid has that. And I think that's kind of one of the changes probably that needs to happen. I don't know how that goes about happening, just because it's been part of our system for so long. It's not going to happen overnight, obviously. But I think that's like one thing that particularly if like as big as the women's game is here, and we have good teams here, I feel like in the future that can really have its repercussions, having something like that in place. So I feel like for me, and just what I want to achieve, and I've always been like wanting to challenge myself and get out of my comfort zone and learn different culture and learn different styles of play. I think for me, I know the system here really well. I know how we like to play here really well. The English game is so different to the American game, and the German game is so different compared to the American game all over. So I think in order for me to continue to, like I said, learn and grow, and just, in terms of fulfillment too, I think, that's kind of anywhere in UK, Europe is kind of where I want to be, where it's probably maybe first choice. Like a lot of people probably support their local football team rather than an American football team or a baseball team that takes first place. place over everything else. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking for, and I think I would probably have a little bit more success and without, along with getting to learn and, also having my setbacks and, learning from those, So.
Definitely an interesting viewpoint, and great to hear from someone who's over there and how they have that outlook on the system over here and going about it. I think that's such an insight to have, especially talking to yourself, and being from the outside is great to hear. And I hopefully everything works out for you and you can continue along that pathway. But as we know as coaches, football isn't the most easiest pathway to commit to, and it takes a lot of toll on ourselves. So, when you are playing, then suddenly you've had that injury, it's how then you've had to overcome that injury, then get into coaching, then start your pathway, then do your coaching badges, then, continue to progress as a coach. And then that sacrifice, which it is essentially by coming abroad and pursuing that dream, which is great because you're getting that cultural experience, you're getting, the coaching experience, you're getting away, you're doing something else, you're going to do a different. That's amazing in a sense, but it's also that big sacrifice as well because, whilst you might come out here, you're not on Pep Guardiola wages, so you're not flying out all of your family to come with you every time you move to a job. So then, it's that relationship bound which, does come into football massively, especially for players, but then it's not considered for coaches as well. And, it's difficult then to pull yourself away from that and take you out of that comfort zone because of those relationships and those things actually drawing you back by roots.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny because when I was playing, my dream was to always play overseas. And then I was a coach, my dream is to coach overseas. And so my family was like, well, you've always wanted to go overseas, so probably. I'm like, there's a lot of things I'll miss obviously about, if it happens, the familiar quality, you can never beat it. But I think also where you get the most growth is where you really challenge yourself and maybe put yourself out there more. I grew up in I grew up in South Florida. I grew up near the beach, sunny weather, year round, never having to worry about having to go indoors, and and then my college years, for college I was in Pittsburgh. And so snow, cold, gloomy days. Lost my tan quite instantly. And then for my master's degree, I've been in Ohio, which is essentially the same weather: snow, rain, gloomy days, and an occasional sunny blue sky every now and again. So I think just my experiences from college and doing all my degrees has really prepared me for a challenge where I'm going to be out of my comfort zone. I'm not going to be in a familiar place. I might not always be happy with, because I did grow up in Florida and nice weather, I might not always be particularly happy with what I'm experiencing weather-wise. But I know that because I've done it for the last 6-7 years, I've lived away from home. I've also grown up a lot. And I'm the youngest in my family. Out of my siblings are 13 to 15 years older than me, so they're married, have kids, they're further along in their life than I am. So it's helped me grow up a lot, and I think as a coach too, it's helped me grow a lot as a coach because I don't have particularly I have people to lean on, but it's not like I can come home and switch off because I'm with my family or that sense. I've really thrown myself into the game, and whether that's healthy or not, it's just constantly on my mind. And I have to find ways just to kind of check out of it a little bit at times, but it's definitely helped me a lot as a coach. And like I said, prepare me for what I think is going to be my future, hopefully, with living abroad and in unfamiliar territory and things of that nature. So.
Definitely an interesting viewpoint and outlook, but it's that pathway which you have to sort of go for it and follow on because as many people say, you don't want to live life in regret and going, oh, I actually wish I took that 10 years ago because as much as you might want kids or might want to get married at some point and goods and this you don't want to get there and go, oh, I didn't get that chance to go, and then you might have to relocate your family, or then you got those increased costs, or then it might never happen. Whereas at least if you go now and then go, do you know what, I come back to America, it didn't work out, or I just worked out that coaching wasn't for me, I'm happy to do this, and then settle down. At least then you've sort of taken it rather than never doing it at all, because I think that's something that we have to do is is take that jump when you feel most comfortable to do it, because that's when you should. Because once you're too comfortable and don't take that jump, then you're ready to stay in there for such a period of time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I was always taught, be comfortable getting, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And like you said, like right now I don't have too much restriction tying me back. I have a puppy, granted. I have a dog, but he'd be going with me, but not too much in the sense of ties. And like you said, I think right now, and I've said it to people who are like, "Are you sure you would want to go like right out of college? Like, why not at least stay here for a year and then pursue it?" And I think right now, like while I'm kind of comfortable making that jump, because say I give it a year, I go back home to Florida, I'm like, yeah, I've never lived in Florida ever again. then it won't happen. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to live. I'm very much the type of person, I don't want to live life with these regrets. Like I was young and I had this opportunity to go over there and experience this, even if it didn't work out. Like I had that opportunity and I didn't do it. Like I don't want to be that person that has to kind of moan about like, that didn't work out, and I didn't do it, and I didn't get the opportunity. So no, very much that same mindset. So it's definitely something I'm working towards for sure.
And let's hope that it works out and continues for you. And it'd be great then to see how much you progress, how much you learn, whether you change and tailor your ways, and because it's a continuous learning curve, as we say, and we are shaped about environments, we are shaped by experiences, shaped by people, and the English game could shape you entirely and make you into a very different coach. And I know I got to a point when I was coaching in the English system myself, because I was at academy level. I ended up changing so much as a coach, and there's so much that I take away, and I enjoy that, and I learned so much, and it's helped me get to another level. But then there was getting to a point where it became so disciplined, so bogged down in terms of the standards that we instilled at this one club, mind. So don't let me put you off. Where I took the step back, because I was like, I'm not enjoying actually being in this environment, because it's so intense over a period of time. And that's because I had a team which I was so used to being with. We were essentially a family, and I really enjoyed being with them. I enjoyed having those experiences. So I was able to encapsulate all of that within that one team, but then I wasn't able to replicate that in that intense environment and take that away. So I know that I had to take myself away from it, but I absolutely love being in the academy environment, and there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I love being back in this. And when I am coaching this Not Eames team now, I'm like, come on, that should be there on the expectation, because I've worked with those players. And when I get the older boys, because I've coached them and knew of them when I was in the academy and they were, we were doing things fast and quick, and that's what we do in training. And then when I see the other players not connecting their passes, I see these boys getting frustrated, and I'm exactly the same, because we were from those environments. And it's just little things. I know that one boy absolutely screamed at the one last week because he failed the trap ball. He's like, come on, basics. And that's just because it was just always that standard that this player's going to have it. We're going to play quick, fast, and this is how we're going to play. So I think it's going to be an incredible journey, and I know it's going to shape you, and there's much that you're going to take away from it. But it's absolutely an incredible experience. There's so much to take away from it. It can be difficult at times, but that's the coaching world for us. But absolutely, I honestly got. I'm giving you back in, and I just want to see you succeed and do well.
Well, thank you, Luca. Yeah, no, like you said, it rarely, like, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And there's definitely, like, as a player, there's a lot of highs and lows that you go through, and how you react and adapt to those lows. Sometimes you just gotta have to, like, ride a wave almost, and just kind of get to some steady level, maybe surface level, but, sometimes you just have to ride it and kind of get through that little bit of maybe a low time. And like you said, like I think the biggest reward isn't obviously don't make millions of dollars. Don't think that'll ever happen for as a coach, but you do it. Like the biggest reward that I get, and the biggest takeaway I get is like when you see kids that want it, like my first full season with my team, and my team, they had a rough fall season, and in the spring we went undefeated. But throughout the fall, throughout the spring, they showed up every day. Like their parents were texting me, like I had kids that were kind of on the edge, like before I took over the team, and they were kind of like, well, we don't know if she's particularly wants to play. Like, we'll give it a go in the fall and see how it goes from there, and see if we like it in the spring, and vice versa. And I think the biggest compliment and like the biggest reward that I got away was like just getting texts from parents that like, thank you, like kid enjoys playing again, or they will always want to have training like every day. If there's training every day with it, you'd be so happy. And things like that, like when you kind of get to a level and understanding, and just in an environment where the kids enjoy showing up to training, they enjoy playing. They enjoy playing for each other. And they just constantly, that was like the first thing I really wanted to instill with my first group was, the aspect of being a teammate, being a good teammate. Like I addressed earlier, like a lot of the great teams I played on were teams like I still talk to them today. We would still hang out today if we were all in the same area, like we tried to whenever we were all up from college, and we're all in different ways of life right now. But those were like the really good teams I played on, and it wasn't just because like we were really good or whatever. I mean, yeah, we had some like really good years and really good seasons, but we were like really close, and our families were really close too. So I think that's like the mentality I've kind of instilled with my first group, and they've taken that, and they like when we have players that move up to the upper, the higher teams, we have kids that just break down in tears, and then I have to manage that. With kids having a breakdown because one of their really good friends is moving out. They're happy for them, but they're like, okay, they're leaving us, like we won't see you every day. But no, I think that's super important. And, just the reward of seeing kids get better, develop, and like if we introduce the topic in training and then they do it in a game, they do it seamlessly, and it's like second nature to them. Like that's better than a win for me. Like that is a win. It might not be a winning result, but it's a win for me. Knowing that they're able to take the information and implement it for sure.
And it is great that we do see players progress and we see that transition, because it shows that they're executing the outcomes, they've attained the objectives, and that session that's been purposeful in the way that you have coached them it's been attained and achieved and replicated, which is exactly what the point of coaching is. So it's great when you can just stand on the side and go, yeah, I've done that, or I've got them to do it, and you're standing there beaming, you're like, that's wicked. And you're like, even though like your team might lose, like the other week we lost 3-2, but I was like, oh, we've done this, we've done that, and you've replicated this, and this is a learning curve. We're not bottom of the table, we're not top, we're not winning, so why don't we make these mistakes? But why don't we try and make things pay off and then address it again in training? Because this is a 3-year project for us as a team, and there's so much which you need to do now and get those mistakes wrong, whereas at 19s you cannot make those mistakes in 2 or 3 years when you are a little bit older. Do it now, and let's make things pay off. And it's great when you see the players that they've learned something, or they're able to go on and try and do it, but they get it wrong, and then the week after they've actually paid off. And I was like, right, you made the mistake last week, you've learned from it, you've addressed it, we've moved on, and you're now getting to those levels. And that's again where that guided discovery learning and the opportunity to make mistakes comes in, and it just shows the importance of it and how the player can use it. But what I think you're doing as a coach is certainly incredible, and the players who are working with you are very lucky, and I think that every player ready to come under your coaching regime is very lucky to continue.
No, thank you very much for that, Luca. I hope they're enjoying playing under me. I definitely enjoy coaching for sure.
Well, I absolutely have no doubt that they are, and that they're taking much away, and it will continue. But yeah, I just think that the journey's been incredible, and that we've just literally scratched the surface. And just even thinking back on, because I'm trying to think of where we're at now compared to what you were saying earlier, and it was just such a key moment where it was just so much information being thrown out there by you, and I think there's just so many key takeaways. And in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking of those who are listening and the coaches that might be on a pathway themselves, and I just think there was so much to take away. But I think I think it'd be great definitely to have you on a few more times, as long as you want to, and I think that there's so much which you've got, and that we can certainly capture. And as I was talking, there was so much in my mind, like, oh, we could do this, we could do that, and I'm already succession planning already, because there was just so much in that. But I really appreciate your time, and coming on and making this happen. And honestly, I definitely want to do it again with you, and whenever your time frame allows, then we can get it done. But honestly, I'm so glad that we could get this arranged, and I think that you've been a brilliant guest and would be a fantastic continuing.
Well, thank you, Luca, and thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm glad we finally found some flexibility to finally get this in, even with the minor, I guess with the conveniences and inconveniences, I guess you'd say. But no, I would definitely love to be back on. I'll definitely give you just what's coming out. Like this semester for me is kind of opening up a little bit. Obviously, I'll have training and games coming up, but no, I'm going to come back on and a few more times even. I appreciate you having me on, and there's a lot. I'm always like fascinated by learning from coaches from different countries because obviously, like we talked about, there's a lot of different ways of life, and the systems are so completely different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of significant differences, and learning like how your approach is and just the whole setup and your background and everything has been super beneficial to me too.
And when you said that there, you've just given me an absolutely idea, and an amazing idea of something that I've never done before that I think I'm going to try and execute with you because I think you'd be perfect with it because just the way that you approach things and the way that your mind's working. And that's what I see. As much as it is a podcast, it's trying to challenge other people's ways of thinking, learning, and try and give them things that they can take away, as well as us literally learning in the process because you might have seen me just scribbling down some notes as you were talking, but that's what I'm doing. I'm thinking, taking notes, and I'm processing. Honestly, it's a nightmare in my mind because it's going in every direction. It's not just this square box thinking.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. Like I'll watch like a game and they'll do something. I'm like, oh, that would be kind of like there's probably an intro for that. Like we can come up with one. Little things like that, or just watching. Like I watch random YouTube videos and things like that, or Twitter. I think Twitter's a great place to find different videos from different people. Honestly, I feel like that's like a great way to connect with other coaches through Twitter. It's funny as it sounds, but I mean that's kind of where we connected too, I guess. But I really appreciate it. And love to go on. I'm happy to be a guinea pig too in any sort of new project you take on.
I absolutely love that, and I think that's amazing. But we'll definitely get that arranged. And but before you go, and as I mentioned you yesterday, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you, and wrap up from there. But if you could have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Passionate. I would say very driven, ambitious. I guess you could say driven, ambitious. And then caring. I very much care about people around me, developing really good relationships. So.
Great words, and I would absolutely agree. To an extent, you have answered this, but say you made it as a pro coach now, and you've been at a club for a few years, and you've got the opportunity in front of you to go to any country in the world for any job. You've got it on paper. Your agent says, right, you sign it, you're going. What country would you want to coach in, and why? And it might still be the same answer, mind.
That's tough. Like I would say, like England or Spain. Spain for the weather and obviously their football culture, but England has great football culture too. And I would just say the only takeaway would be the weather. So I mean, to kind of go to Spain would be a little bit like going home to Florida, except for the language. But I speak fluent Spanish, so that would be kind of easy transition too.
Well, that's pretty wicked. And as you say, coming over here, you would lose the weather. And I know my best mate, he lives in California, Palm Spring, and he's texting me all the time pictures. And like, he's on Palm Spring beaches playing basketball, and I'm looking out the window like, mate, it's literally tipping down here.
That's how, like, my family and, back home, they still send me pictures every day. Like, look, it's 80 and sunny and we're at the beach, and I send them a picture and there's like a snow pile outside my window, and I'm like, very different, very different environment right now.
Absolutely. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be and why?
On the male side, I would say like Sir Alex Ferguson. I always looked up to him and Brady time and things like that. But on the women's side, probably like Serena Vigman. She's someone honestly the biggest compliment I've ever been paid was by one of my friends in England that said I remind her a lot. Serena Vigman because I'm not the type of person to panic. I don't like to pace. I definitely do not yell. I've had so many parents say, "We appreciate you so much for not yelling at my kid." So I think there's a lot of similarities between me and her, and I would love to learn and just talk to her and learn from her for sure. So, but obviously on the male side for sure, it's Sir Alex Ferguson without a doubt.
2 great answers. Who was or is your role model?
Coaching wise, I would say Serena Van right now. Yeah.
Great. Same answer.
On a personal aspect, definitely my mom. My mom. She's just a steady rock in my life and someone I look up to a lot. So.
Love that. Love that. I love a personal one. To be a full-time professional player, say without that medical condition and having that opportunity there, or a full-time coach at top tier level, which one would you go for?
But choosing between the two,
yeah.
Playing pro or coaching. I think as much as playing pro like that would be phenomenal. But you never know how long that career is going to last. For coaching, you might have a little bit more of an idea, like sign a contract, and there's probably a little bit less of a risk when you might coach. I mean, obviously there's still risks, but I think you kind of have a better idea. Like there's no injury that can probably happen that will injure coaching careers per se, or something like that. So I'll probably say I'll just stick with coaching. I think it's a little bit more long term than playing.
Strong logical answer, but I like it. I like it. If you were to give a top tip to any coach, what would it be?
I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but just not really have your own personality as a coach. I think honestly, yes, be open to feedback. I think feedback is so important. We expect a lot of our players to be coachable and adapt to what the instruction we give them, but I feel like that can go two ways. Like if another coach is giving you instruction, maybe be open to that sort of feedback. If a player is telling you something that maybe is not working on the field, not working in the dressing room, be open to that sort of feedback and be open to adapting and maybe changing it around a little bit. I would definitely say never, have your own coaching identity, your own philosophy, and your own approach for sure. There's little ways I think as a coach that you can kind of nitpick off of other people's approaches and coaching philosophies. Like I really like that concept. I'll kind of add that into maybe my coaching method and things like that, and core values per se. But I would say that's the biggest one. Never let anyone tell you like, oh, you're not good enough for this. Maybe you're not up to the standard. Just kind of always take it with a grain of salt and run with it. Because I think there's an opportunity out there for everyone. It might not be always in the place that, like for me, like right now, I want to end up in England. Doesn't mean England's going to work out for me. But I know at the end of the day, I'll back myself and say I know I'm a good coach, and I think there's an opportunity out there for me. It might not be where I think it is, but it doesn't hurt to try and see if it is. You have to try different things in order to learn a little bit more about yourself. So.
Of course, very strong answer, very strong. If you had the choice of any job out there, what would it be?
Any job. Just the coaching job, like the coaching of the club, or
coaching club, national, any coaching job.
I would love. I would love to coach like a women's professional club. I think I'm pretty open to any of the clubs really, but I think it'd be pretty cool at Manchester United. I grew up a big Man U fan. Arsenal obviously has tons of history. With their women's team. So I think there's two different ends of the spectrum. Like there's a team that's kind of on the rise and a team that's kind of already been set. So I think just the two different perspectives, I like both challenges, I would say.
And in that sense then, say Arsenal women come to offer you a contract, 4 years, very nice contract in the Women's Super League, or the American women's national team in a very good place offered you a contract, and these were one-time offers and they were in front of you, which one would you pick?
I think there's a really good challenge in a team that's kind of already has like a huge expectation on them. So probably the Arsenal job. probably the Arsenal job, honestly. So.
Fab. And final one, if you could coach any player, who would it be?
Any player. I really like Lena Oberdorf from Germany. She's a young player, and obviously, she's kind of already been really recognized amongst, some of the best players in the world. So probably her on the male side. I've always been a fan of like Marcus Rashford players like that. Like growing up, it's funny because I watch videos of kids today talking about how they're watching videos like Cristiano Ronaldo and Neymar, things like that, Messi. And while I watched videos of Messi, I was always like into like Johan Cruyff and how he played and things like that. Very much old school type of players. So I think I could even go back to say like it'd be cool to coach a player like Johan Cruyff and the talent he had and things like that. And obviously his football knowledge as well. So.
Love it, and what a perfect way to finish off the end is talking about that football knowledge and excelling from that and taking that away. But again, it's been truly grateful, and it's been wonderful to speak to you. I know that they were supposed to be quick fire questions, but I think when you've got the sort of answers and the way that you're elaborating on them and the way pulling knowledge off and that you are, I think that just shows the level of that game intelligence that we were talking about and the way that you're thinking, which I really do appreciate and love about the way that you are thinking. But I'll drop you a message shortly. But I really, really appreciate the time, and I'm glad we have connected.
Well, it was my pleasure, Luca, and thank you again for having me, and look forward to the next time.
Fantastic, and I'm glad the connection stayed stable for the rest of the conversation.
I know, yeah.
But no, thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca.
Thanks, bye.